welcome to Beyond the CGA Classroom. Expert talks on education, career pathways, lifestyle, and industry trends. I'm your host, Danny, and in this series, we explore the future of learning with inspiring stories, expert insights, and practical tips that will help you unlock your limitless potential. Whether you're a student planning your next step, a parent supporting a big dream, or an educator curious about the intersection of learning and innovation, you're in the right place. Before we begin, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media at Crimson Global Academy. Today's episode is a special one. We're joined by none other than Dr. Jamie Beaton, visionary entrepreneur, global education leader, and the driving force behind Crimson Education and Crimson Global Academy. Jamie's journey from New Zealand to becoming a global force in education is nothing short of extraordinary. He's been featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, named to Forbes 30 Under 30, and awarded both New Zealand's Young Entrepreneur and Innovator of the Year. At just 17, Jamie was accepted into 25 of the world's top universities, including Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, and Cambridge. Since then, he's earned degrees from Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, Yale, and Tsinghua, and he's still going. But beyond the academic accolades, Jamie's vision has changed the game. He founded Crimson Education in 2013 and later Crimson Global Academy, who just turned 5 this year. In this episode, we'll step away from the usual university admissions focus and take a closer look at Jamie's personal journey as an entrepreneur. We'll talk about what it takes to be an innovator and how students today can start thinking much bigger about their future in education, career, and life. So let's dive into this inspiring conversation with Dr. Jamie Beaton. Hello, Jamie. It's so great to have you here. Thank you for joining us on Beyond the CGA Classroom. Let's kick things off with something fun. I love asking all our guests a little icebreaker. So to start off with, can you tell us what was your dream job as a kid and how far or how close have you come to it?
It's a great question. I would say when I was really young, like I was 3, I wanted to be a firefighter. But I think as I got a bit older, things evolved. I think when I was 13, I wanted to be a doctor. By the time I was 16, my goal was to work on Wall Street as an investor, which may sound boring to some, but for me sounded super exciting because I got to study some of the world's, best companies. And actually, when I graduated from Harvard, I did begin working on Wall Street for this hedge fund called Tiger. So I kind of, to some degree, realized that dream. And I remember actually sitting in this building in 40th and Park Avenue with my Bloomberg terminal, looking at stocks, doing the quarterly earnings calls. And I felt like I'd sort of, realized this vision that I had in my mind when I was a teenager. And so I think that was quite exciting. But, I had this entrepreneurial itch, so to speak, where I was helping students online with their university admissions process. And I was building Crimson really at night. I'd do my work during the day at Tiger, and I'd be building Crimson at night. And it was so fun, so rewarding, so exciting. And that's what led me to really take the plunge into entrepreneurship. And actually, when I was in high school, I really didn't even know what entrepreneurship was or meant. I didn't really think of the idea of starting your own company. The idea seemed a bit, I don't know, foreign to me. But I would say, yeah, my initial goal was that hedge fund investor.
Okay, great. Well, it's good to see that that dream was realized. I think everyone goes through those different stages when they're young, with dreams evolving and interests changing as they grow up. So we've spoken about now what sparked that, maybe the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey. What early moments made you believe that this thing that you're building could actually be something big?
I think there are a couple of breakthrough moments. The first was we ran an event at Crown Plaza in Auckland, and we initially planned to have, a small group of families come out and hear about the submissions experience from these students that were recently admitted to a wide range of schools. And we packed the venue, and it was so packed that people could hardly fit in the room. And I thought, wow, people are really curious about this. This could really be something. I think also when one of our early students, Samir Singh, gained admission to Harvard, his story was on the front page of the national newspaper, and it went totally viral, and we had families all across the country reaching out, and there was this insatiable curiosity about his own academic journey. Then I think the next piece that I think was a bit of a breakthrough for us was when we realized for the first time it wasn't just in New Zealand. People were excited about this process, but also confused how to navigate it. Our initial events in, for example, the UK and in Sydney had some good turnout. And we began to see there was an opportunity to build Crimson to be a global phenomena rather than just one in New Zealand. So there were a couple of the, I think, early hits that made this pretty exciting. The last piece I would just say is I just found the undergraduate experience at Harvard so mind-blowing, so amazing. It opened so many doors, and it was like the step change where I was witnessing my life transform almost week by week as I met new folks in this new environment. And I realized actually, if I can kind of make this opportunity more accessible for families around the world, and I can kind of demystify some of the myths and legends around these schools, that could be very powerful. So that also, I think, gave me conviction that this was worth doing, and that
Mm.
actually a lot of the world still had this kind of like incorrect or not so informed view of the journey into these amazing universities, and therefore it was meaningful to build this thing.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Maybe thinking about it more practically for students watching the video, what were some of the first steps that you took to move from concept to company?
So the first thing, got to have a website. And there's a funny, I think, advertisement for maybe Wix or something where they say, it's not real to have a website. And I kind of agree. So I made this website on this like janky as website editor thing. It was horrible design. I wish I had a photo of it to this day to show you. But it was, I'm not much of a designer. In fact, I'm a terrible designer. But I was so enthusiastic that I whooped open this thing and I, got all the profiles of our early team and typed up all of our different services, wrote that in Chandre's living room, our co-founder. So I remember we actually got a photo of the day we made the website sitting there side by side, which was quite fun. So that was the first step that was really concrete. And then we created a Facebook page to begin um, recruiting students. And back then, Facebook was very active, the Blue Facebook app. And so, you have like a Facebook groups and you kind of have your Facebook page. And so we began posting out what we were offering. And then I also registered the company, and can you kind of file this thing in New Zealand to get it going. So there are a couple of the early initial steps that I took. And then from a service delivery standpoint, I began to recruit tutors. I recruited the three other kids that gained admission to Harvard this year from New Zealand, and then also a bunch of people that I'd kind of done academics with in high school who were very sharp, and they became our initial pool of tutors in New Zealand. So that was how we got things rolling.
And there's a lot of things that you mentioned here. How did you fund these initial steps? Like building a website, did you use a free website? You go straight into a premium offer? You recruited tutors? Did you pay them? Was it volunteers? How exactly did you fund all of this?
So at the beginning, I recruited tutors and they had an hourly rate, but you pay them when you have a student for them. So you're not carrying fixed costs, so to speak. You
Mm.
have this book of tutors that are willing to help. When it came to the website, I initially used a free trial. Of course, Facebook's free as well to get started. And so I think some of the first paid expenses I had were like Facebook advertising, for example, where I'd put like $20 into an ad and pray I would get a student. So it was quite good fun. Really quite fond memories. And what other kind of costs do we have? Um, Printing flyers for the event too, like just making sure you had collateral and things printed that were good for the families. Um, Paying for the venue was a big cost back in the day, negotiating that with every dollar really counting. Yeah, so we started it with $40 literally, and it was something where we would have to sign students, and then they would pay their tuition dollars, and then we'd measure sort of our profit margin, and then we'd take some of those profits, then use them to invest in these different activities to kind of begin
Mhm.
growing Crimson. So it was very bootstrapped, and we really had to focus on managing every dollar, but it was so thrilling, so exciting, and exhilarating. Every moment felt like this new adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think the biggest expense was the marketing costs by listening to you talk about the funds that you needed. Um, what are some of the lessons that you can share from a startup that students can maybe apply now, even if they're not founders yet, thinking about maybe someone has an idea about a company they want to start, but there's some challenges or boundaries that's keeping them from pursuing it. What lessons or what advice can you kind of give them to overcome those barriers?
I think the first thing is your business is not real until you have a paying customer. And I think there are so many people that go out there and they have some, amazing idea or something for their business. But until you have that first customer who actually sees value and pays for it, that's really important. And the reason for it is if you think about, let's give you some, like take Netflix. You pay Netflix $15 a month or something, and you get this unbelievable product. And actually, to actually make someone pay money for a service versus just say, oh, that's a cool idea, it's a massive, massive difference. The difference between, for example, imagine if you make, a chicken and chip box, you try to sell it for like $4 and compete with KFC. Actually, the world's very competitive. So getting that first customer who parts with a dollar, even a dollar to pay for your service, that's a big moment. It also shows that you've got like the ability to sell and convey the value prop. So I think that's actually a really key initial step. You want to spend as little time as possible sort of ideating and kind of like umming and ahhing before you start speaking to customers and trying to get their engagement. The second thing that I would say is the best marketing usually isn't expensive. It's usually like local, guerrilla style marketing. I used to hand out flyers outside schools. I used to go to, for example, prize giving ceremonies and recruit students. And so you don't need to start with some sort of splashy marketing campaign. And in fact, the way you kind of get those grassroots early adopters who are passionate about your mission or what you're building or your product is often through those kind of quite unscalable initial marketing channels. So we actually spent almost nothing on marketing for the first 12 months of Crimson. Then we started to ramp it up over time, but we were very delicate, little Facebook ads here and there. Yeah, so I would say the perceived barrier to creating a company is a lot higher than it is. And back then, there was no magic AI tools. Now, with AI tools, you can build apps, you can build websites super fast, and the cost to like get access to business advice is at an all-time low. And also, the world's going through a lot of disruption and new opportunities popping up with these different tools. So, there really, literally has never been a better time to build a company. And people always say that, but I think it is actually true that throughout the course of the last 20, 30 years in history, each new year is a better and better time to start a company because the
Mm.
barriers to starting, the cost of starting is going down, and there's all this change happening, which creates the opportunity for new ideas and new ventures. So there are a couple of things that I would say. The most common misconception I hear, which kind of drives me nuts, is when someone says, everyone has already invented everything. The world's already got
Mm.
everything you need. I can't think of a new idea. Everyone's always thought of ideas. And that's kind of crazy because the world isn't fixed, actually. It's like this constant adaptive, evolving set of preferences. And so there's always new needs. Think about all the wacky health treatments in Los Angeles, for example, that, maybe the world never knew they needed 20 years ago. But now these things sort of boom. Imagine Equinox, or Starbucks. Back in the day, coffee cost $1 or something, and Starbucks was trying to charge $4. And that sounds insane. Like, why would you pay, for example, 4 times the price of a lunch to go there? And so I guess the point is the paradigm's always changing. The world's constantly in flux. And an
Mm.
entrepreneur knows that actually there's actually more things you could ever build than time you have to build. You're not usually truly idea constrained once you start hunting.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. So do you believe that an entrepreneur is born or made? Is it something innate in every person, or do you think it's skills that can be taught?
It's a great question, actually. And, I am, of course, in education. And so I like to believe everything can be taught. But I think there are some aspects of entrepreneurship that are a little bit innate. For example, there's an element of shamelessness required to do sales and to basically try things and fail and just be embarrassed and not care. And of course, maybe you care a little bit, but um, that's an element of this. You just have to be willing to just pitch people on things and fail. And so that's sort of a personality trait, I would say. Secondly, you need a bit of delusional self-belief because you're pushing against tough odds because you kind of have to believe you're going to build something unique, unprecedented in the world. And so you need an aspect of that. And then thirdly, some people are quite conventional or linear in their thinking. And so you need to be able to have that capacity to see beyond the status quo a little bit. And all those skills can be learned, but I think they come easier to others than some. And then I guess finally you need this like, kind of understanding of resources, like people, opportunities, like um, other assets, whether it be technology or other things, and kind of how to use them. And you learn these skills, for example, playing League of Legends or playing some sort of strategy resource game, Risk or Catan or something. So you can learn this through different channels. So I would say it is certainly a skill you build over time. But there are some folks who are really like eager to pull the trigger on this and just try and get going, and others who are just really opposed to it. And I think if you don't have some of those traits initially, you can work on them. But I would say it tends to be the case that you have certain personalities that enjoy this kind of torture
Mm.
more. Because entrepreneurship, there's a lot of fun. It's very exciting, but there's a lot of for every win, there's a lot of pain along the way. And so, you've got to kind of really love that journey.
A lot of pressure with building your own little empire, right? So you were talking about learning these traits. Is there like a key mindset or habit that a student can grow from being student to CEO? Is there something they can do now to build these traits?
Absolutely. So, one of the reasons why I love US college missions is that actually to get into these top schools like Stanford and Harvard, you need to show leadership in high school. And there are many different ways to show it, but you can do things like launching a club, launching a blog, a campaign, fundraising. All these things that require you to mobilize resources, sort of see an opportunity and launch it into the world and then make it happen, execute. There's some of the skills required to kind of begin becoming that CEO founder. Now, there are some CEOs of large corporations who aren't founders, right? Think about, for example, the CEO of an airline. They didn't build the airline, they didn't design the plane. They basically came in and they're sort of managing existing resources. It's actually a different skill set to a CEO founder who kind of has to develop the business and then sort of strategize how to run it. So I would say a founder and a CEO are two different skill sets. But to,
Mm,
to be like a CEO founder, I think launching those early projects in high school can be very effective.
excellent advice. Um, you've built one of the fastest growing EdTech companies before 30. What does personal growth look like to you, maybe then versus now?
So the thing about entrepreneurship is, for the most part, you're constantly learning at every stage. When you have, you know, no one on the team but you and your co-founders, when you've got some initial contracts, when you begin making your first hires, when you're opening in different markets, when you make your first acquisition, when you're learning new products, it is a constant learning journey. And actually, you have a lot of these inherent personality traits, and some of them are bad, some of them are good, and you've kind of got to keep reforming yourself and leveling up to be kind of relevant for the next stage. And I would say that requires an openness to feedback, to criticism, to really self-awareness as to kind of what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you can learn, and what you should just probably avoid doing. Um, so I would say my definition of personal growth has always been, do you feel uncomfortable with some aspect of what you're doing every day? Do you feel like you're running towards a fire? You're not quite sure how you're going to put it out. If you don't feel that way, you're probably not growing fast enough. And if you do, if you feel kind of a bit uneasy and uncertain, that's when you're kind of pushing into a
Mm,
new frontier.
wow. Um, the education space is notoriously hard to innovate in, yet somehow you did it. Um, so let's talk about CGA. What inspired you to launch an online school, and how do you think this model is reshaping education?
So when I was in high school, one of the things I thought was kind of crazy is everyone was sort of told, hey, you're supposed to do these four A-level subjects, and you kind of wait to your year 11 to do your IGCSE, year 12 to do your AS, year 13 to do your A2. And I was thinking, this is nuts because some of these subjects are way harder than others. And, I can actually go a lot faster through certain subjects like math. And I was finding things that, like, I was doing a lot of my learning outside of school, actually, not inside school, where I'd go home to my tutors and I'd actually get through far more content than I would at school. And so I had this kind of early instinct that school wasn't particularly efficient, it wasn't particularly personalized, and people just assume that, this is kind of the way things should be. So I began to launch Crimson as sort of a solution to many of school's gaps in terms of the extra counseling, support, mentorship, personalization you really need to complement your physical school experience. We helped this boy, Samil, I mentioned earlier, the guy who got into Harvard, and we got him to take six extra A-level subjects alongside school. He was like my guinea pig. I really believed he had the academic potential to do a lot more, and he took all these extra subjects. He actually achieved the second highest result in New Zealand in scholarship exams, and almost, I think, the first equal number of outstanding scholarships in history. And I was thinking, he learned from all these extra tutors, 20 of them or so that we gave him outside of school. And I was
Mm,
thinking, why couldn't we create a virtual school that provides everything a school does, but actually lets you move at the pace you want to learn at, lets you choose different classes, different difficulties, different streams. And this thing was kind of cooking up in my mind. And I had these early emails about kind of creating a school from really early days in Crimson. But then I came across this school in California called the Stanford Online High School. It was an accredited school. Elon Musk had a kid in the school. And I realized actually this wasn't some revolutionary concept that actually existed in America in some form, but was really nascent around the world. And then I thought, we definitely need this in New Zealand. We need this around the world. And how can I customize this to be a Crimson style virtual learning environment? And that gave rise to what we call Crimson Global Academy. And at the same time, I was actually studying at Oxford on my Rhodes Scholarship, looking at what drives student outcomes in online schooling. And I actually made that my mission. So I studied the academic literature behind online schooling, what made these schools successful or not, and what could I apply to our own school, our own curriculum. That gave me sort of the pedagogical approach to make this thing happen. So between my experience with students and then the academic research side, we were able to bring this thing to life.
Mm. Amazing. You mentioned earlier that people people say that there's nothing more to innovate in this world. This goes to show that you don't necessarily need a brand new thing that's never been invented before, but you can go move into a space and just do something better or differently and also innovate in that way.
This is a famous phenomenon called second mover advantage. And the point here is people often talk about first mover advantage. You got to be first in the space. You need to like run and gun and get out there and grow as quickly as you can. There's a lot of benefit to that. And certainly, we've benefited from being a first mover in many of the countries we're in. But second mover is like you look at what the first guys do, you see what their gaps are, what's not kind of working, where the mistakes are, and then you can just launch your product. You skip a lot of the initial, failures they've made, and you have something ready for the market straight away. So, a good example of this would be take the company Grubhub. It's a food delivery business in America, and it was one of the first companies to do food delivery at a big scale, or rather online food ordering. Now, they were around for about 20 years, and then DoorDash and Uber Eats jumped into the market and they looked at what they were doing and they said, actually, how can we do this better? And they created the idea of providing the driver to actually enable all these restaurants to have a driver attached to them without needing to hire the driver themselves. And this created now DoorDash, which is about a $100 billion company, Uber Eats, which is a part of Uber, which is a $200 billion company, I think, and have just really massively innovated. So that's a good example of the second mover phenomena.
Mm, mm, mm. Um, let's take it another step further. Talking about online education, global education. You've seen education systems now in New Zealand, in the US, the UK. How do you think global, maybe a twofold question, how do you see global education evolve? And on the same, in the same breath, I know CGA has recently acquired a brick and mortar school. So how do you see the hybrid model grow into the future?
My general idea is that hybrid schooling solves many of the core challenges of the physical school. What I mean by this is, in a physical school, it's kind of crazy. All the teachers have got to actually live near the school, and all the extracurriculars you do have to be around the school. And this means that if you live in New Zealand, you're literally restricted based on what teachers can you find living in Auckland around a school. And that's going to obviously dramatically constrain the quality. I think about Crimson, if I could only hire staff in one city, it would be impossible to build basically, because we're able to tap into people all around the world. So in a blended school, you can have some amazing teachers in person, but then you can actually tap into this global network of amazing teachers for certain classes and streams. And there's often the case where you might have a couple of kids in the school who want to learn A-level law. And if you don't have a hybrid environment, how can they do that? So I would say what we're really trying to pioneer here is this really innovative hybrid learning model where you can kind of combine the best of the physical interaction, the social experiences of that dynamic live campus with the power of Crimson Global Academy. Now, for some folks, fully online is a better option, and for other folks, fully physical is a better option. But I do think hybrid is going to be the way of the future, and that's what we're looking to build.
Excellent. I'm going to throw this one in there since we're talking innovation and new things, and AI is new and it's in the classrooms. And what is your take on AI in the classrooms? Is it a overwhelming yes from you, or maybe still uncertain?
I think for now, the biggest issue with AI is that it provides students the ultimate I used to play this game called Grand Theft Auto, which is this video game where you can kind of run around the city and do whatever you like. And there was cheat codes where you could hit certain, instructions on your controller and you could unlock tanks and guns and the
Mm,
police would be ranked 5 stars and, the world would go crazy. I think AI, unfortunately, right now for many students is a kind of education cheat code where you pull up your ChatGPT and you can literally throw on your assignments, your essays, your projects. You can even sit in class with it on your laptop and you can have it record the teacher and then give you a response to say. So I think there's huge instantaneous risk right now of it
mm,
being abused. And I think, frankly, a lot of students, the majority, are probably using AI more than they should for a lot of their assignments around the world. I think once you figure this out by doing probably things like more live assessments, more in-person exams, more conversational style assessments and dialogue in class, laptops closed in class, once you figure some of these things out, then AI offers enormous potential because AI basically provides a personalized tutor at a fraction of the cost of a normal human tutor. And I think that access means that you're not constrained by your teacher quality. And I talk about Auckland, but imagine being in Northland in New Zealand, we are even more constrained, by what teachers you can actually hire. The
mm.
AI enables you to have this world-class tutor anytime, which is very powerful. So I'm very bullish on AI's potential. I think with some of these kinks figured out, I think for a typical school that doesn't know what they're doing, the school is going to basically not constrain AI enough. And the overarching experience with teachers is going to be one of massive frustration because kids will be using AI tools to do all their assignments. They won't tweak the rubrics enough. And you're going to have this like learning loss phenomena where students aren't actually doing the work properly and they become, very disengaged. So I would say enormous potential, but it has to be well led and it has to be well understood. Otherwise, it's going to have these adverse side effects.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. On the flip side, though, we have AI that's being used as part of our online school that's enhancing the way students are actually learning, providing them with AI takeaways on class lessons and things like that. So, what is your view on that innovation in that space from an online schooling point of view, offering this education to students?
I mean, incredibly powerful because you can actually have personalized feedback on your homework, your assignments.
Mhm.
You've got tutoring all the time. You can ask questions instantaneously in class. If you're a little bit shy, rather than putting your hand up and asking a question, you can just quickly chat away and ask a question, get that instant response. So I think there's enormous power to having AI in the classroom to complement that live teacher experience. I think ultimately some aspect of human relationships are still very important to kind of have the accountability. Bill Gates gave a forecast recently, where he thinks in the next 10 years, all teachers and doctors will be replaced by AI. And, maybe in 10 years, I'll look back and watch this and think, that was a dumb thing to say. But I do think that probably teachers will be quite a enduring part of the school system because you do need to have that accountability. Because ultimately, part of learning is self-control. It's having mechanisms in place to kind of drive a student to learn stuff rather than to play video games and watch TikToks. And that's not always fun for a student. And so having the teacher there is powerful. So I would say the AI is, yeah, enormously exciting, but I imagine it'll be a teacher AI combination for a long time to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, So with all these trends happening, AI and things like that, how do you see that shaping our next generation of student entrepreneurs or change makers?
So the most direct result is there's never been a technology in the last 10 years probably that is going to provide such a massive change to almost every single industry as AI. I think about even a kind of physical service like imagine a real estate broker who buys and sells properties. A lot of the time you have, customers trying to buy a house and they don't really know what should the price of this property be, what are the regular concerns someone might have buying this. It's a lot of personal opinions. But with your AI, you can just get instant valuation feedback, instant insights into kind of what the property should be worth, what the problems are, what the risks are, how to due diligence it. Maybe you'd go and get a property lawyer to help you close this transaction, but a lot of the time those lawyers just do the same thing every single day with template forms. Again, the AI can do that too, probably faster and easier than the lawyer can. So I guess my point to here is it is a very exciting time to be a student entrepreneur because if you know how to use certain tools and you can kind of incorporate AI into your business, you can build something that probably is 10x better than the current players that don't know how to use AI. One recent example, there was a student, I believe, an MIT graduate who was, tinkering away with a tool that helps you code online, and they built this company called Cursor. And Cursor's gone from 100 to 300 million of revenue in a matter of months. So these AI businesses are growing at a unbelievable pace, and they're breaking all of the historic records and how fast companies can grow. And so I do think there is something in the water here that is probably quite permanent. And I do think things like Bitcoin, cryptocurrency are a bit overblown, full of hype, but I do believe that AI does have some fundamental merits that make it exciting. For example, for me, my interaction with Bitcoin is like going to a cafe, seeing they take Bitcoin payments, thinking, oh, that's kind of weird, and then leaving. Probably all the only time in my life I've actually interacted with Bitcoin, and I'm being a bit silly. When it comes to AI, I'll be using AI almost every day to do some Google searching that I would used to do kind of on a search platform, but now on the AI platform. So I think there's something here to stay about AI, and I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, yeah. So, as a very successful person, what does your typical day-to-day look like now? What are you busy with? What is your next project? And how do you balance all of this ambition with your well-being?
Great question. So I would say um, I've definitely had the benefit of an amazing team around me for so many years. So I think about Dana, who I work with closely on my schedule, where I'm trying to jam every day full of, meetings with my students, meeting with the team, one-on-ones with our leaders around the business, meeting new potential companies to acquire or invest in, maybe speaking to some investors about their vision for Crimson and, how we can learn from other spaces. I'll try to get some fitness in there. I'll try to get some, time out to hang out with some friends potentially, and then a bit of hobby downtime as well. It could be, painting some Warhammer or maybe playing a game or reading a book or something, strolling through the New York streets and taking in just the atmosphere and energy. But it is usually pretty packed, and I tend to start pretty early and finish quite late. But I do have pockets of the day where I'm kind of mixing things up. Then I also travel a lot, and I would say, compared to probably your typical person, I am on the plane in different countries a ton. This year's been pretty hectic. I feel like I haven't sat in one place for more than probably 10 days for, a year or something. And that's exciting, but also it can be a bit draining. And, trying to figure out how you, for example, like eat healthy or sort of run or something, if you're like in and out of different places is good. But it is a balance that I love. And, I think when I'm not hectic, I just feel not as enthralled and excited. It's that energy and just constant adrenaline that keeps me going.
Amazing. So it's go, go, go. What advice do you want to give our students, our listeners, or our viewers who wants to build something meaningful, but feels like they don't have the roadmap ready yet, or they don't have the resources or connections?
So I would say a couple of things. First of all, you should think about listening to podcasts like How I Built This, getting some insights in different companies. You should consider reading books like Zero to One by Peter Thiel. You should also be thinking about, how you can absolutely nail your academics, because academics can help get you into these top universities like a Wharton, where you can easily raise capital from investors and build these great, organizations. You also can read about angel investing in some of the new companies being created. Y Combinator often puts up a list of companies they want built right now, new opportunities they see in the world for founders to go and tackle with new ideas. Um, so there are a couple of different strategies and approaches, but I would say in high school, I was very focused in academics, and a lot of my entrepreneurial adventures began after high school ended. So in high school, just make sure you don't drop the basics. Like academics, so important, not only because of the content, because the discipline required to actually like study for tests, manage your time, manage the stress, do different activities. These are all traits that make for a high performing person in the future. And so I would say school has these multiple benefits of kind of getting you in the game, ready to compete on the world stage. So there are a couple of things that I would say to aspiring entrepreneurs.
Love it, love it. So, in conclusion to our very awesome talk today, what is one thing that you hope students will feel or believe about themselves after watching this episode?
So I'll just say, when I was in high school, I didn't feel like a leader. Leadership seemed like something that wasn't for me. I wasn't a good public speaker. It didn't come naturally. And I think if you asked a lot of my classmates if they thought I was going to sort of build a business, they'd probably say absolutely not. And so the key thing is, who you are right now does not reflect at all who you can become, what you can do, how your skills can evolve, and things can rapidly change. And so I would say focus not on like your current traits, focus on your trajectory of learning, how fast you're growing as a person, who you're around that will motivate you to grow even faster, tackle new skills, pick up new insights. That's critical. That rapid pace of innovation, that's how you grow and innovate as a person. So I would say keep focused on that future version of yourself, the person you want to evolve to become, and don't worry so much about your weaknesses right now because that can all change and evolve as you get running.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you for your time. It's been such an insightful session. I'm sure our viewers will walk away with definitely something to inspire them.
Beautiful. Thanks so much. It was really fun. I'll catch you soon.
Well, that brings us to the end of this inspiring episode of Beyond the CGA Classroom. A massive thank you to Dr. Jamie Beaton for joining us and sharing his incredible journey from high school prodigy to global education innovator and everything in between. So if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs a little inspiration today. You can also follow Crimson Global Academy on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Facebook to stay updated on our latest content, events, and thought leadership in global education. Well, thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.